We recognized right away when they slipped into the playoffs at the very end of the season that they were going to be a tough out, given the kind of talent they had.
We were playing very well going into the playoffs, and we would have been a 50-win team if it had been a regular season of 82 games. But because it was the lockout shortened 50-game season, we were the 8th seed. And that was really unfortunate for Miami because we were probably the 3rd best team in the Eastern Conference.
The team split the first 4 games, none closer than 10 points to set up a do-or-die Game 5 in Miami. The Knicks battle back from 13 down to trail by a point with the ball in 19.9 seconds left.
I had a pretty good seat because if you remember the play, Latrell Sprewell had the ball and he made a big mistake. He dribbled himself into a corner and Terry Porter was there and the ball went out. But the ball was awarded to the Knicks. No timeouts for the Knicks.
We were really disjointed on the last possession. Sprewell was trying to create something off a pick and roll. Bad possession, gets knocked out, and we ran triangle down, which is a isolation up at the top of the key for Allen Houston.
Van Gundy calls a play a triangle. That usually means something for Ewing. Allen Houston. Houston ducks under. Got it! With 8 tenths left.
I'll tell you, I thought I kind of short-armed it at first. But it hung up there. Seemed like 2 minutes instead of 2 seconds.
I believe it went rim, backboard, in, and then it was sheer ecstasy.
Life in basketball, has a lot of suffering in it. And we will suffer this one.
I was at that game, covered that game, and remember thinking, there's no chance that ball's going in.
Again, I'll say it again. People were trying to judge each individual on our team too early, and the team too early in this short season. They've played great basketball the last 3.5 weeks to a month, and I couldn't be happier for them because they deserve that.
It's funny, too. After that shot was made, the Knicks beat, obviously, Miami. They go on to the next round. They play Atlanta. They go right from Miami to Atlanta. They win those 2 games. One of the big moments, of course, is Marcus Camby having that dunk on Dikembe Mutombo, which I really thought was the defining moment of that series.
Camby alone. How high can you fly? He got a running start. He started running way before he received that ball. Full head of steam for that dunk.
By the time the Knicks came back to New York to play Game 3, think about what had happened. They had beaten Miami and Pat Riley. They were up 2-0. So you want to talk about a building that was on fire. And when the Knicks started winning in that game, the crowd started chanting Jeff Van Gundy.
Well, a month earlier it was Jeff Van Gundy, and then they finished with sucks. So, fans are fickle, and it's all based on performance of the team.
Right now, there's a chant here at the Garden. Jeff Van Gundy is what the fans are chanting. A wonderful moment for Jeff Van Gundy.
I'll tell you what, seriously, there are very few things that you remember as a coach in vivid detail as you go along in your life, but that's one that I'll never forget.
The Knicks went on to sweep the Hawks, then beat the Pacers in 6 in the Eastern Conference Finals. However, they lost Hall of Famer Patrick Ewing in Game 2 of that series to a partially torn Achilles. Without him, New York fell to the Spurs in the finals in just 5 games.
Do you think if the Knicks have Ewing, they beat the Spurs?
I'm not so sure if they do, because Patrick was getting up there a little bit. It would have certainly helped. So the Knicks were really beaten up. Not only Patrick not being able to play, but you also had Larry Johnson not 100%.
I would take my chances with against anybody with a healthy Patrick Ewing. Larry Johnson was not healthy in that series either. He had sprained his knee in our Game 6 at home against the Pacers. So, yeah, we had our injuries, but that's part of it. And the Spurs were very, very worthy champions.
The run to the finals earned Van Gundy a contract extension. But what if Allen Houston's runner had rimmed out and knocked out the Knicks in the first round?
If the shot bounces out, he's probably done in New York. So that's a career changer. And who knows what that means for Jeff down the road.
Jeff Van Gundy he has said it many, many times. If that ball had not gone in, the entire Knick structure would have been fired. I mean, it just changed the course of the lives of everybody in the front office.
Well, I would have been fired, and I think that's how delicate success and failure is in professional sports. When the ball's in the air, good coach, bad coach, good coach, bad coach, good coach, and it bounces in, and you get to live another day.
There's no doubt in my mind, if they lose that series, they fire Jeff Van Gundy. And so what do they do then? Well, their president at the time was Dave Checketts, and Dave Checketts was a guy who liked to make big splashes and big moves. He's in New York, big market. I have no doubt in my mind they would have gone all in to bring Phil Jackson in as their head coach.
If that ball bounces out, I think it's very likely that Van Gundy is out. And there might have been a remake right there. I mean, that was the year that Dave Checketts was trying to sign Phil on the sly. And, for all we know, had that position opened up, that might have happened back then, only with Phil as a coach.
The Knicks get Phil Jackson in 2000. There is no Lakers. There is no three-peat. There is no Kobe and Shaq. They probably trade Kobe or Shaq well before then because the two of them, as we know, weren't getting along. Phil was the guy that kept that whole thing together.
That shot by Allen Houston, if it bounces out, a lot of things change. Jeff Van Gundy probably isn't the coach. And then who comes in? Is it going to be Phil Jackson? If Phil Jackson comes in, are they looking to get rid of Patrick Ewing? They're looking to get rid of other players.
And if they didn't get Phil, I think they would have gone after John Thompson, because John was Patrick's coach in college at Georgetown. John always was curious about coaching in the NBA. He never saw a job that really appealed to him, a position that really appealed to him, a city that really appealed to him. I think they would have gone after John Thompson if they didn't get Phil Jackson.
It's hard to know what Jeff's path would have been. I think that the ball bouncing in helped create the legend of Jeff Van Gundy. I mean, I'm not going to say he wasn't well thought of to that point, but certainly that run to the finals, helped cement Jeff as his own man.
So Jeff by that time had become a big-time folk hero, and I think people kind of identified with him as the guy just trying to work as hard as he can every day, try to make the team good, and his boss was trying to stick it to him.
He needed that win. He needed that victory in order to change his persona. And sometimes that's not fair. The bounce of the ball shouldn't always dictate the future of a head coach, a player, a GM. But this is why we love sports. This is part of the attraction.
Coming up on What If, we look back at another big shot by Big Shot Bob.
Phoenix hasn't won. It's going to be 2-2. They've got home court advantage. Right. And then Ori knocks down Nash, outruns Stoudemire. D outruns up the sidelines. It's like, oh, here we go again.
It's the Eat and Play combo only at Dave & Buster's. Starting at $17.99, get a $10 game card and your choice of 17 apps or entrees 7 days a week. Eat and play for $17.99, one more week only, and only at Dave & Buster's.
I want to change the world.
Got me questioning whether I could do this. Am I good for that boy?
Sam Landry just made a big mistake.
You need to wake up. It's all a lie.
I know what I'm doing.
When you brew a beer with this much taste, 96 calories seems like a typo. But it's no mistake. It's a small miracle. What are you holding? Miller Lite. Hold true.
Are you talkies enough?
Capital of Iceland.
Reykjavik. R-E-E-Y.
Whoops.
Takis. Taste the fury of our flavors and face the intensity.
So you guys have recently started dating? Yes. Cool. I want to show you guys 3 Chevy SUVs. The first one is called the Trax. Great for when you move in together. And this is the Chevy Equinox. Perfect for when you two have your first kid.
Give me some time.
Okay. This is the Traverse. For when you have your 5 kids, 2 dogs, and 1 cat.
Whoa.
5?
It's the Chevy Memorial Day sales event. Get an additional $750 on these select models. That's on top of most other offers. Find new roads at your local Chevy dealer.
Mix and match the flame grilled Whopper with crispy chicken or spicy crispy chicken. The 2 for $6 mix or match deal. Only at Burger King.
Hey, Paul.
Sprint turn. What are you up to?
Showing you the unrivaled iPhone 10.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, it is nice. And you know what I can do with it?
No, what?
I can unlock it with my face. They call it Face ID. Here, let me show you. See?
Do you have to make that face when you unlock it?
What face?
Get the unrivaled iPhone 10 now for just $20 a month. That's 50% off from Sprint. Switch to Sprint to get the best price for unlimited.
Real smooth.
Why you always say that?
It's like my tongue just did a finger roll, and then the Gatorade flow gave it a high five.
Real smooth. Whoa.
Gatorade Flow. All the flavor with a smooth finish.
How do you win at business? Stay at La Quinta, where we're changing with contemporary makeovers. Then use the ultimate power handshake, the upper hander with a double palm grab. Who has the upper hand now? Start winning today. Book now at lq.com.
Robert Horry's career has been defined by clutch shots. And in Game 4 of the 2007 Western Conference semifinals between the Suns and Spurs, Horry connected on another big shot. Only this one wasn't a jumper. It was a hip check that might have swung the outcome of the entire playoffs. But what if Big Shot Bob didn't connect on this particular big shot?
So this series is tied at 2. And it returns to Phoenix for a pivotal Game 5 on Wednesday night. And right here on TNT, let's go to Craig with Steve Nash.
Well, Steve, this is a late game, particularly on the East Coast. It seems that San Antonio was dominating it. People that went to bed early are going to pick up the paper and something and say Phoenix won. They're going to say, how did that happen? How would you answer that?
I think simply we stuck with it. We could have folded a lot of times. They were playing great, making a lot of shots. Could have discouraged us, but it didn't.
In the late 2000s, the Spurs and Suns squared off in 4 playoff series over a 6-year period. The familiarity fueled the rivalry. A culture clash defined it. The establishment Spurs were building a dynasty, and the splashy Suns were revolutionizing offensive basketball. But the Southwestern antagonist history came to a head thanks to a play normally reserved for the ice, a hockey-style hip check against a Canadian, no less. That may have been the most influential moment of the 2007 playoffs.
And here is Nash being chased, and they had an look out. As Horry sent Nash flying, and Bell goes at Horry. Nash got up. He wants to go at Horry. The Suns did not appreciate the foul by Robert Horry.
Do I remember it? I still have nightmares about it. We were going to win that game, go home, and have an opportunity to close out the series against the vaunted San Antonio Spurs.
I know for sure I would be 3 or 4 years younger looking. That's for sure. What else? They would. I probably wouldn't have the 3 ulcers I'd have. Only about 1. Those are physical stuff that definitely came out of that.
Well, I remember that it was talked about for a lot more than the seconds it lasted. When it is that Robert Horry, I think, accidentally ran into Steve Nash, and Steve found himself in soccer mode against the scorer's table.
I was trying to go there and take the charge, but I got there a little late, so I had to just, do a little body check.
Robert Horry has made a lot of big shots in his career. Some may say that was a cheap shot towards the end there when he forearmed you into the table.
Good one.
What is your impression of what happened?
Well, he just body checked me out of bounds. I mean, I understand he's frustrated. It happens. You know, I'm sorry it happened to him, but I mean, he did body check me.
This was a classic, what would have happened. I was calling the game with Steve Kerr, and we looked at each other when Robert Horry gave that hip check, or as Steve Nash referred to it as a body check.
Phoenix has it won. It's going to be 2-2. They've got home court advantage. And then Horry knocks down Nash, outruns Stoudemire. Diaw runs up the sidelines. It's like, oh, here we go again. You know, so many playoff games that I remember have altered series based on guys running out onto the floor. And my initial thought was, yeah, this is not going to go well for Phoenix.
Yeah, at the time, I was the senior vice president in charge of basketball operations for the NBA. And part of my duties was to enforce the rules of the game and also maintain decorum and discipline in the game. In 2007, we had an incident in the Western Conference semifinals between the San Antonio Spurs and the Phoenix Suns.
There's some question whether Amar'e Stoudemire had left the bench to go over to your aid. Some people said maybe he was going in to check in. Did you have any inclination, or did you see where Amar'e was?
I have no idea. I was seeing stars from the check.
I was going to check on Steve. I'm walking toward him to see if he's all right, because this crunch time in the game right now, you know, and so I'm making sure he's good, because we need him to finish off. This is the playoffs. We got to have our two-time MVP on the court.
If I remember correctly, Stoudemire ran out to pick up Nash. I don't think he went out and confronted Horry. And I remember Diaw running up the sideline. I don't know, he left the bench area, but he didn't run on the floor.
Question is, did anybody leave the bench off this melee?
Well, you see Stoudemire coming into the play, and the coach is sending he and Boris Diaw back to that bench area. The question is, were they on the court or not? And you talk about a young mistake. I mean, if indeed Stoudemire was on the floor, which looks like, you know, the league will have to look at very closely, and that could cost Phoenix Amar'e Stoudemire in Game 5.
And Boris Diaw and Amar'e Stoudemire violated the rule that required that players during an altercation, which at that time was between Horry and Steve Nash, during an altercation, you could not leave the vicinity of your own bench. Boris Diaw and Amar'e Stoudemire did, which required an automatic one-game suspension.
You know, and I understand that they had a rule, but in the spirit of everything, I just didn't think it was a good decision. I just thought that they were applying the letter of the law.
You know, by the letter of the law, the NBA did the right thing. I remember years earlier, 97 probably, Miami and New York got into a brawl, and like 6 guys took one step onto the floor and went back, and they all got suspended. And I remember at the time thinking, that's insane. Like, let's have some common sense here. But David Stern was so adamant about getting this stuff cleaned up that he was going to suspend anybody.
I will say that the commissioner and I did have a heated exchange, probably louder at his end, when we discussed that. And maybe the only time in my life there was a 6-month period there where we actually didn't speak. And for somebody who's your mentor, that's an uncomfortable position.
We didn't wrestle very much with the decision because that rule is a pretty bright line rule. If you leave the vicinity of the bench, it is an automatic one-game suspension. But in suspending Boris Diaw and Amar'e Stoudemire, it left the Phoenix Suns without 2 of their key players going into Game 5. And it affected, in all likelihood, the outcome of Game 5, which the Phoenix Suns lost to the Spurs.
Steve Kerr mentioned when you guys are down 11, he goes, this could be a defining moment if they could get over this hump and being a championship team. Do you look at it that way?
Well, I think we got a long way to go. Maybe after all said and done, we can look back at this, but I think there's so many moments left to go, let alone in Game 5 and the rest of the series, and then the playoffs beyond if we're lucky enough to get by them. So we got a long ways to go.
The Suns wouldn't get by the Spurs, losing Game 5 at home and then dropping Game 6 in San Antonio. But what if Horry hadn't sent the 2-time MVP sailing and set off the scuffle that led to the suspensions? What if Phoenix had been at full strength for Game 5?
Would they have won? I mean, there's no way that I would sit here on camera and tell you that that Suns team was a better team than what we had that year, especially going on and winning the championship. But there were tremendous matchups, and some of the most elite play by pick-and-roll players that I had seen since Stockton and Malone.
Who can tell? You know, Amari is a streaky player. You know, D.I. is a streaky player also, so you can't say. You know, it might have made Tim mad not having me on the court with him. He might have went for a triple-double. I just think sometimes the basketball god shines down on the teams they want to shine on.
We had the advantages, man. I mean, we had a young team, athletic team, and we had the experience of already being there a few times playing against the Spurs. And we felt like we was on the verge of winning that series. So I do think if that wouldn't have played out that way, we probably would have won the series.
I felt they would have, only because if you go back to that time, the Phoenix Suns were probably playing the best basketball in the NBA at that time. They were coming off a 61-game season. It was an all-star season for both Nash and Stoudemire.
You know, as a player on that team, I like to think that our chances were still good, even if those guys had played in Game 5. I know that was a home game, but the Suns had their chance and did not even push that series to a Game 7. So as controversial as that series was, I like to feel like the better team ended up winning. And I know we went 8-1 after that and ended up winning the eventual championship for the 2007 season.
But did the hip check ultimately cost the Suns a shot at their first NBA title? What if they'd beaten San Antonio?
Well, given the fact that the Spurs went on to win the championship and beat the Cavaliers 4-0, I would say yes. If the Phoenix Suns had reached the finals, they probably would have won an NBA championship.
I think that was probably Phoenix's best chance to win a title. They were right in their sweet spot. Nash was in his prime. Yeah, that's one that Suns fans will always look back on and shake their heads, but it was their best opportunity to knock off San Antonio.
It changed the complexion of the series, and I'm sure the Phoenix Suns to this day are thinking, what if perhaps if our guys were there, it would have been a completely different story. It was a perplexing situation, obviously, for the Phoenix Suns, and it's something I'm sure they have not forgotten to this day.
We would have won the championship. It would have been a game changer for the Phoenix Suns franchise, and who knows what would have happened at that point.
No, I don't know. You know, would we have won? The fifth game is, 80% of the time whoever wins the fifth game wins the series. Yeah. To go back home with the full roster, maybe. But we might have got beat anyway, so I don't know. I don't dwell on it that much, except for when I see Robert Horry.
Coming up, we deep dive into one of the biggest trades in draft day history. And what if it never went down?
I always said to myself, what if C. Webb and Shaq would have played together? We probably could have did the same damage that Shaq and Penny did. I think about it all the time.
Growing up in Indiana, you knew the game of basketball. Now, that's what you knew. I wanted to be the best.
Too easy for Skylar Diggins.
Coming back from my injury was one of the biggest hurdles in my professional career. I'd never been without the game of basketball before, so just being out there on the floor again with my team was an accomplishment. I was really proud of that. I'm here to work.
Real smooth. Real smooth.
You done? Gatorade Flow, all the flavor with a smooth finish.
No way. FanDuel's letting you pick 5 guys that win cash each night of the playoffs.
5 players? With me as the GM, the coach, and the trainer, we'd be unbeatable.
Well,
unbeatable.
How do you win at business? Stay at La Quinta, where we're changing with stylish makeovers. Then, at your next meeting, set your seat height to its maximum level. Bravo, tall meeting man. Start winning today. Book now at lq.com.
I'm telling you, Mobil 1 annual protection protects any type of vehicle for 20,000 miles.
Even your luxury automobile?
Yes.
What about my luxury automobile? What about a sports car?
Yes.
Or 4x4?
Yes.
Or a sedan?
Yes.
Or subcompact?
What about an annoying car?
That's cold.
Because I have one of those.
20,000 miles between oil changes guaranteed. Mobil 1 annual protection.
YouTube TV, cable-free live TV is here. Try it free.
Painful, swollen legs, tired, achy feet. Feel familiar? Introducing CopperFit Energy Socks, graduated compression activewear designed to help reduce swelling and provide energizing support.
I couldn't believe it, but I had no swelling when I took them off. My legs are just energized.
Helps reduce swelling discomfort from prolonged sitting or standing.
Being at the professional level, your body takes quite the beating. When I discovered the CopperFit Energy Sock, it really gives you that revitalizing feeling.
Soft, odor-reducing, copper-infused fabric.
I've made like 4 trips now where I've worn the Energy Socks. I don't feel the pain or the tiredness.
Feel more energized. Feel more active. Just feel better. Call 1-800-896-3173. Get 2 pair of white or black energy compression socks for only $19.99 plus shipping and processing.
It really makes a difference. My legs would tingle at night and they don't now.
When you find something that works, you're going to tell everybody you know.
CopperFit. Live limitless.
25 years ago, the Magic traded Chris Webber to the Warriors, a mere 20 minutes after picking him #1 overall. It was one of the most fascinating deals in draft day history, and a move that reverberated throughout the NBA for the next decade. But what if the trade never happened and Orlando kept the big man?
The third pick in the 1993 NBA draft goes to the Golden State Warriors.
Philly or Orlando? Philly or Orlando?
The second pick in the 1993 NBA draft goes to the Philadelphia 76ers.
Unbelievable.
And believe it or not, the first pick in the 1993 NBA draft goes to the Orlando Magic.
The Magic securing the #1 pick in 1993 was the most improbable result in the history of the NBA draft lottery. Orlando finished 41-41 and just missed making the playoffs. But suddenly, general manager Pat Williams was in perfect position to draft Chris Webber, a can't-miss power forward prospect out of the University of Michigan.
If I go play on this team, I'm going to average a triple-double my whole life because I'm going to get 10 boards, and it's going to be so easy getting 10 assists. I'm going to get 10 oops a game.
Everyone knew about this guy, Chris Webber, and what he could do, his big old hands. And we still had Shaquille O'Neal. But as a shooter, I was saying, I have C-Webb on one block, Shaquille O'Neal on another block. I'm going to get so many wide-open shots. This is going to be fun.
I watched him in college, watched him in high school, and it reminded me of myself. -3 inches. He was a big guy, liked to handle, liked to make good passes, and a big guy that liked the ball. And I think if I wouldn't have done the movie Blue Chips with Penny Hardaway.
Take that! There it is. There it is. There it is. There it is. You see what that does? That picks that man down there. Now that pick can get set.
I thought that's what I was doing.
No. You took the ball and you just took off around that way. Play this two-man game. Son, play the two-man game.
That year, there was a movie, Blue Chips, and I didn't want to be in a movie. I wanted to work and get better as a player. I just come from college with a great team. It didn't end the way that I wanted to. We lost the championship, so in my mind, it was more about grinding it out, getting ready for my next challenge.
First of all, I had no idea who Penny Hardaway was. So I'm doing the moves with Blue Chips, and, you know, the guys are always putting us on the same team. And I was saying to myself, damn, this actor can make it in the NBA. And one guy pulled me aside, that's Penny Hardaway.
My agents, friends, family thought I was crazy for turning it down. And looking back, I may have been, because the only reason why Shaq and Penny are together is because they used to play games after filming.
Penny Hardaway so impressed Shaq during their pickup games on the set of Blue Chips that the big man convinced the Magic front office to acquire the multi-skilled guard. And although the Magic drafted Webber with the #1 overall pick, they had no intention of keeping him.
Orlando has traded the draft rights to Chris Webber to Golden State in exchange for the draft rights to Anthony Hardaway and 3 future first first-round draft picks.
I always say to myself, what if C-Webb and Shaq would have played together? We probably could have did the same damage that Shaq and Penny did. I think about it all the time.
So what if that trade never happened and Chris Webber remained in Orlando? Could it have worked with two young and dominant big men on the same team?
Wow. That's interesting. Chris Webber and Shaq. I mean, it's like Shaq and baby Shaq, you know, on the same team. It would have been tough to go in the lane with Webb and Shaq. And I do think, look, with the talent, they would have figured out a way to make it work and be successful.
So part of me is old school, which I wish we'd have kept the big fella, but Penny Hardaway was special. I think that's why, without the injuries, what if could have been a great thing.
I mean, I think we would have done all the damage in the world. I think I would have had fun in it, but it wasn't meant to be. You know, Shaq and I always tease each other about that. What if it would have happened?
What if the Webber trade never went down and Hardaway remained in Golden State? Maybe Penny becomes the starting two guard with Tim Hardaway running the point. Sweet shooting Chris Mullin could move to the three while multi-dimensional Billy Owens starts at the four. That leaves lefty Chris Gatling at the five and the explosive Latrell Sprewell off the bench. That's a pretty deep team for head coach Don Nelson and his lead assistant, Greg Popovich.
Knowing Don Nelson, that's really interesting because they would have started playing small a lot earlier in the NBA than they do now. Don was always tinkering around with small lineups, so now we would have been small and would have maybe revolutionized the game that way a little earlier.
At that time, the NBA or basketball world was looking for the next Michael Jordan. Penny Hardaway, right after Grant Hill, was that next guy that was 6'8", that could handle the ball, that could shoot the three, he could post up. He was basically a matchup nightmare at the point guard position.
I was aware of his game, and you know there were some similarities. I think we were both guys at 6'7", 6'8", could do a lot of different things on the court, and I was just anxious to sort of, okay, how does his game translate at the next level? Can he, sort of play that point guard position, or is he more of a two?
I didn't know that I was going to Orlando. I thought Chris was well-deserved of the first pick, and I thought they had made the decision. But once they said about the trade, it surprised me a lot.
I don't think Penny could have gone wrong in Golden State. The way the Golden State played, if you would have put him, Spree, Billy Owens, Mully, and Tim Hardaway together, with the way that Don Nelson was coaching there.
It would have been very tough to announce because in the backcourt you'd have Anthony Hardaway and Tim Hardaway, so you couldn't say Hardaway's bringing the ball up the floor. You'd have to say their first names.
I think if we'd have had Webber, we would have had the same success. Obviously, it would have been in a different way because we'd have been inside out. Every night, big guys would have had to get a good night rest.
Do you remember what your starting lineup would have been?
Starting lineup would have been Scotty Skiles at the 1, Nick Anderson at the 2, Dennis Scott at the 3, C-Webb at the 4, and me at the 5, which is a pretty deadly team.
Penny and I ever talked about what? No, because going to Golden State made me who I was. I got a chance to play with Hall of Famer and Chris Mullin. I got a chance to experience the West Coast. I got a chance to win Rookie of the Year. And so who knows what would have happened with all those things. And I became even a bigger fan of Penny and a friend of his in Orlando because him coming off the pick and rolls with D. Scott in the corner, Shaq going to the oop corner, shooting that jump shot up top. They just had an awesome team. I would say it was pretty much a success for both of us.
I'll say it, not ashamed. Like, Chris is great at what he does because of the support system he has. I always say that Earvin has two personalities, and I always think of him as Earvin, the guy I met, and then there's Magic.
Chris is my best friend. We talk about anything and everything, so if he knows that I'm not in my seat, most likely he knows why.
I'm used to lovey, mushy Shannon, and then they lose the game, and I'm like, who the hell just walked out the locker room? Who was that?
Welcome into a special edition of Open Court. We're exploring the force behind your favorite NBA players, their families, I'm Kristen Ledlow. Over the next hour, we're going to get into the game and also into life off the court as we welcome in the wives of some of the game's greats. We have Cookie Johnson, the author, activist, mother, the wife of the Laker legend and Hall of Famer Magic Johnson. Thanks for being here. We also have Monica Brown, the Grammy Award-winning singer, songwriter, mother, and wife of NBA champion Shannon Brown. Welcome.
Thank
I
you.
love the big smiles after each. We have Jada Paul, who's married to the Houston Rockets all-star point guard Chris Paul, dedicated to a number of philanthropic organizations in her community, including the Chris Paul Foundation. She is also a mother. Welcome in. And we have Adrienne Bosch, the entrepreneur, philanthropist, mother of 5, and married to NBA all-star Chris Bosh. Welcome.
Thank you.
So my first question, very simple. Why would you agree to be on a show called Open Court? What did you think was going to be happening here?
I thought it would be fun. I thought, maybe we'd come and, meet, especially seeing some of our friends, to be able to sit down and talk with some friends and talk about, our life. I thought it'd be fun.
My thought was that it would be great to see what really happens. There have been a lot of different ideals of what it's like, and I think the realism that we do what every other mom, wife, family member does is important to explore, because you only see one side of it when you look at social media or some of the television shows. I think it's really a misrepresentation to some capacity. You can look at us and see we're all different, but what we share in common is a love for first the person. They just happen to play sports. It is something very different to contend with. It changes the daily dynamic, but it doesn't change that we're just regular, everyday people and women.
So what were your husband's reactions to you being part of this Open Court forum?
Chris was excited. I've spent the majority of his career in the background, which is my comfort zone. So kind of the same thing like Monica was saying, just an opportunity to kind of share like our day-to-day lives and things that we do and things that people don't get to see. So he was excited.
My Chris was very supportive as well.
Your Chris. Right. We'll get that straight. Don't worry.
He came by the set before we even started filming today. He's always super supportive of anything that I want to do. Whether it's for our family, whether it's involving basketball, whether it's off the court. So it's always good to be able to come together, especially for something positive, to hang out with these ladies and share what we do and our families and, our normal day-to-day stuff.
Some of you were immediately thrust into the limelight. Does that take some time to get used to?
Yes. I'm from a small hometown in North Carolina, Winston-Salem. But even when Chris first went to the NBA, I didn't live with him right away because we were both in college. So he left school early and I still had 2 years left. So I kind of went back and forth. So I kind of tiptoed in and out. So I got a chance to get adjusted slowly, but it's been fun. This is year 13. It's kind of hard to imagine it's been that long.
I guess my dynamic is a little different.
For sure.
When my first album dropped, I was 13 years old. And then when my husband and I met, I was 29, about to turn 30. I had 2 small children. So I was living that really complex life where I was juggling motherhood. And then we meet after them winning the championship.
The LA Lakers, the 2010 NBA champions.
So we both meet at one of the most hectic times career-wise. I think what made it harder for him is he had a very quiet life until meeting me. Once he was off the court, it was quiet. After meeting me, he's like, is that somebody in the bush? When we come in a restaurant, he didn't have to deal with that beforehand. So it was really different, but I think we found like peace and solace, and he understood that I understood.
Do you see, Cookie, a generational difference in the wives in similar positions now as opposed to when your husband was in the limelight the way that theirs are now?
Not really. Not really. And that's interesting because when he was playing and the wives on the